Dave Bolger here, and welcome to Had I Known, an exploration of the Hamilton College experience. A very special happy Father's Day to all fathers out there. I am extremely blessed to be the father of two great children myself. So, hi Celia, hi Travis. I know they're listening. Travis is probably saying he doesn't want to listen, but maybe if I say his name, he'll actually listen for a minute. And Celia just celebrated her birthday on Friday, so once again, happy birthday, love. Been getting great feedback on my conversation with Professor Mark Cryer last week. Thanks to those of you who have reached out, and of course, thanks to Professor Cryer for his wisdom. And don't forget to stay angry, folks. Stay angry. As the focus starts to shift, don't lose that anger. If you're interested in listening to that episode, head on over to our new home on the internet, hadiknown.buzzsprout.com, hadiknown.buzzsprout.com. There you can access any previous episode, but you can also check us out anywhere you get your podcasts. Yes, folks, this radio show also now comes in podcast form. So go on and check it out and have a listen. Tell us what you think on Twitter. I've also been getting a lot of great feedback from alums saying that these conversations are resonating and making them ask themselves their own had I known questions about their Hamilton experience. So that's been fun. And one such alum is Matt Kane, class of 1999. Matt's still a good friend. Matt was texting me his feedback on the show. Some of it I can read on the air, and others, well, I'll keep to myself. One of the things he said is that he realizes now how lucky he was, how lucky we all were, to have a place that gave the ability to make a lot of mistakes in a safe environment. And it's that idea that leads me to this week's guest, Bev Low. Bev was the director of student activities at Hamilton from 1993 to 2001. If you were a student then, Bev had a significant impact on your experience, whether you knew it or not. But most people knew it because she took great care to make sure students had an opportunity to live what Matt Kane was talking about. She clearly cared for students then, and as you'll hear, she still cares for them now in her current role as the Director of Guidance and College Counseling at the Manchester Essex Regional School District in Massachusetts. After many years in upstate New York, Bev just had to get back close to her beloved Boston sports. Bev certainly had a huge impact on my time at Hamilton, and it was a tremendous pleasure to be able to reconnect with Bev Low. So here it is. Here's my conversation with Beverly Low. Well, first of all, welcome back to WHCL.
Oh my gosh. Just that. Like when, I was thinking back to when my office was in Bristol Campus Center, and there'd be, I'd oversaw all the student media, and then there would be dead air, and I'd dash downstairs and throw something on. Oh my gosh.
Thinking back of how dumb some of us were running that thing, how anything ever went over the air is somewhat of a miracle, really. I think back to calling games at other schools and just praying that the person I had scheduled to answer the phone to be able to pipe the broadcast through would pick up the phone and know what to do,
right?
And hit the right button.
I know. It's funny. One of the guys on the Zoom social hour, I didn't really crash. Dave Alicio, class of 96, invited me. Sure. But the old lady crashed the party. But so we had a good chuckle about that, because I relayed the story about, I'd be in my office and all of a sudden someone would say, "No one's in the studio." And I'd be like, "Oh, that's an FCC violation, crap." And I'd run downstairs. And then we got talking about cart machines and some of the old technology, and again, the kids, you don't know how easy you have it now.
That's right.
Just go in, and it's all on the computer, just like hit it, it's all digital, boom, boom, boom. We'd be like fumbling around for plastic cart tapes and public service announcements. And
I went back. So I had for I think just about all 4 years, had a sports show with three other guys.
Mm-hmm.
And by the end, I fancied myself something of, a radio person. I had a job in radio my senior year, so I thought I knew what I was doing. And I remember it being particularly bad early on, but my recollection is by the end, we knew what we were doing. We were smooth and it sounded professional. And I dug out some old cassette tapes. I used to tape every show. Mm-hmm. And I started I listened to one for, it was late junior year. So I was thinking, by then we'll be pretty good. And the first one, I just pulled out a random tape. And the first one I played out, it was, it opened up with dead air. You could hear the creaking of everything. You heard us whispering, what is this one do? I don't know.
Yeah. Press that button. Just press that button. I know. That was funny.
Well, welcome back to WHCL. You were my first broadcast partner ever. And so it's good to talk to you on the air here. So you mentioned running down to fix the dead air. And that's kind of my recollection of you at that time in the late 90s, is just finger in the dam, toes in the dam, running 100 different places at once, trying to solve a bunch of different problems.
Yeah.
Is that a fair view of Bev Low in the late 90s on Hamilton?
I think I wore a lot of hats. Yeah. I arrived on the campus in 93 that summer, opened Beinecke Village that September. And then it was just all kind of juggling from there. My heart is in student media. As an undergraduate, I was sports editor of my college newspaper. I think I was the first female sports editor. So, journalism and sports and radio and media had always been, special to me. So it was kind of fun. But you're right, Dave. I mean, it was like, oh, here we go again, like run back and forth, just kind of putting out, little things that were not, there was no real emergency, but just trying to keep things moving in a forward progression. Yeah.
Well, it just always seemed like whatever it is you needed to get done, it had to end up going through you. Right. I need to get, I want to have a party. You got to go to Bev Low. I'm going to be on student media. You go to Bev Low. It's just and then whoever was coming on the campus, cab and all that sort of stuff. It was Bev Low. Yeah. And the thing that really struck me was, especially at that time, and I told the story a couple of weeks ago of, and I think it'll be a common theme for anyone I talk to from that era, which is there was, at least early on in my college career, a real faction between students and quote unquote the administration, but really anything faculty related, because as I said, the summer before I started my first year, we got this letter home saying a decision had been made to take away the fraternity houses. And I didn't know the first thing about what that meant, but it certainly shaped my 4-year experience, because for 3 years, a large chunk of the students ahead of me told me that the school sucked because they ruined the school. And so I was like, oh, okay, so we're supposed to hate all the people that work for the school because that's what the students do. And then I get to meet you and you're like loving it and getting involved. And hey, Bev, you want to call a hockey game with me? Sure, I'd love to do it. And I'm like, wow, she's cool. And you can't hate her. And then to come to find out that you're involved in all of that stuff and having to deal with a lot of angry students and really trying to find a new way of student life on campus. I mean, that must have been a nightmare.
Yeah, I feel like I was a human buffer zone from 95 to 98, 99. Anyway, it's funny, whatever people's personal feelings are, unless you live through it and the trustees, and did a lot of research before making the decision to uncouple fraternities and sororities didn't have houses, but Emerson Literary Society was a co-ed literary society. They were uncoupled too. They lost their house. But the uncoupling, allowing them to exist, but changing the format in which they would be housed and how they would exist. I mean, I'll write the book. Actually, there's a few books to write when I get some time. But it wasn't lost on me. Like the class of 96 will forever. I should have a tattoo on for them, be etched for me as a special class, because a lot of folks in that class, as juniors, stayed the summer of 95, and they weren't necessarily planning to stay on campus that summer, but Jan Coates, who was the dean of students at the time, Nancy Thompson, associate dean, myself, Mark Thompson, the counseling center, a lot of us, Jan had us do a lot of different scenarios, so we had a plan ready to go regardless of what the trustees decided. We had 5 plans in 5 different envelopes, literally or figuratively, however you want to take it. But We knew what we needed to do. And when it was like March 3rd and 4th, I even remember the dates, 95, being in the gym. We were in the gym. But that night I didn't stay over, but I was at the Deke house till 3, 4 in the morning, just listening to them, just listening. And I think about how important listening is for people who are angry, upset, in pain, to feel like something's been taken from them. And you can draw a parallel to anything, current day, past day. But, I won't forget that. And a few of those folks from that house were, Bill Murphy in particular, Jared Bowling, they chose to stay that summer and work on the initiatives that eventually transform the campus culture. Change is really painful, Dave. When you start at a college and then all of a sudden, they take the paddles away and you can't move your canoe the way you want. There was a loss there. But I think that there was a larger social dynamic that needed to be disrupted, and the only way to do that was to make a pretty drastic change. And it was painful. I mean, working in higher ed, and that's where my training is, you don't change a culture of a campus overnight. It takes like almost a decade. I mean, you got to have a couple classes go through it. But it's interesting to hear you say that, because it's like, what did I get myself into? Like, what is this place?
Those of us that started when we did the class of '99. I mean, we were the first incoming class post that decision, the infamous Res Life decision, and who knew what it meant? I as I've said before, the story I told last week. My limited experience was, when I thought I was going to play football, I came up for a football recruiting trip and, went to a party at the DU house and maybe saw you or something like that. And okay, this is cool. This seems like college, but I had no other understanding of what it meant. So when the letter came home, it was just kind of like, oh, okay. So, all right, that doesn't really impact me anyway, personally at that moment. But, then you come to learn how bitter it made a lot of people. And some of it I understood. Some of it seemed like, all right, get over it,
Yeah.
And I think I certainly felt over those 4 years from that first decision until the class of '99 graduated, the culture may not have completely shifted over those 4 years, but it certainly felt different by the end of my senior year, because I think it seemed obvious to me is that people like you were trying different things to evolve the culture, right? Evolve what student life looked like on that campus. And by the end, when all the bitter people had gone and we didn't know any better, we had gotten used to now whatever the sanctioned party areas were and all those sorts of things. But I even think you think about what concerts looked like when it started to when it ended in those 4 years. I mean, that evolved tremendously, and the caliber of talent that came on campus in terms of musicians and comedians and, whatever acts happened. I credit you certainly, and the folks who are working with you to a certain degree of how
we were certainly fortunate to have resources like we did, and a student activities fee, and a lot of the student activities initiatives came out of what is now known or referred to as the residential life decision. But things were put in place there: increased funding, recognition of student organizations, the growth of different types of organizations was tremendous during that time. And, I've seen it from start to finish. I got on campus in '93 and we were inspecting the houses for a year. We'd go in, it was Pat Ingalls, Director of Campus Safety, Frank Marsicane, Associate Director of the Physical Plant, and me. It was like the team of three. Once a month, we'd have to go people were living in these buildings. They were our students, and they were getting an education from Hamilton College. And we had to ensure that, smoke detectors were working, that people were living appropriately, like in terms of safety, health and safety standards, that the kitchens met the Board of Health standards, a lot of those things. And, the houses, the managers even, were given time to correct issues in the houses. Those were some interesting times. But, I was telling the story the other night about, you can have like for anyone who works in student affairs like I did, the best day ever would have been when all student organizations and all students could regulate themselves. But that's a big thing to expect. So I gave the example of there was one house in particular, one February when it was operating, their house manager was a sophomore, and he had no idea how to manage that many people. The pipes froze, the heat went off. They didn't know, and it was a disaster. So I think of the safety part, but I also think of college should be fun. And yeah, you should be able to socialize with the people you want and have parties and do the things that, life transitions and all of that.
Well, that's where I felt like oftentimes it seemed like you said earlier on, you were a buffer between some angry, the angry mass and the school, with an attitude of college should be fun and trying to help students have fun, which I imagine put you in some difficult situations sometimes.
Yeah.
But also never found you to be unreasonable, right?
But Dave, I think
have to explain why they need six kegs for 3 people, and they have to get your approval on it. Like,
let's do the math here. How many people? How many guests? I know. I actually have saved that formula over the years. I mean, we created a social host policy out of thin air. We obviously had guidance and Dean Coates and Dean Thompson, and a lot of people were involved in that. But I have to go back to one of the things that I loved and still love about Hamilton College are that it had, even if when students felt something was taken away from them, students were invested in. Like I can honestly say there is no way that we would have gotten through that summer of 95 to open in the fall of 95 if students were not on the front lines. And like Lisa Magnarelli is a perfect example, who worked with side by side with me in the transition, but then came back and was the director of student activities after me. Mm-hmm. Tabitha Bowling and Bill Murphy and Jared Bowling and a few other folks, but the one thing that Hamilton has never shied away from controversy, whether that be bringing in speakers who you don't necessarily agree with, or they may really make you angry, but you're given the opportunity. I think freedom of speech, one of the foundations of that decision was the right to freely associate, and Hamilton being founded on such clear democratic principles and students. I feel I've worked a few other places, Dave, and I still think that Hamilton's model is by far top notch in that, students, at least in my 8 years there, were involved and their voices were heard. And we may not have agreed all the time. I mean, there were some knockdown, drag out shouting matches that summer, but we got through it and we came out on the other side. Well, so I don't want to take any credit, because I honestly believe that students rose to the occasion, and it was either one of those things where we're just going to rebel, or we're going to be like, okay, we don't like it, but we want to be involved in the decision making.
Well, in my recollection, because I wasn't there at the point in time you're talking about, but the knockdown drag out fight seemed to continue at least into the next year or two.
Yeah, I think so.
Did you, so as that buffer, as you mentioned, I mean, did you ever feel like you got stuck holding the bag a little bit and having to deal with the anger?
No, I feel like, I don't know. I've always, I feel like diffusing that, or kind of like, all right, why do you feel that way? Let's talk through it. And again, it goes back to what I said, or just doing some listening. I can think of some very vivid examples of, one fraternity, the trustees were on campus that winter, I think it was, or maybe it was that fall. And one of the fraternities decided to march with a whole lot of alcohol, like an obscene amount of alcohol with them. I mean, like to the point where it was so obvious. And they were yelling, and the trustees were going into a meeting, and one of the trustees, and I was standing right there, said, well, this is some evidence that maybe we were on the right track. And I was like, oh dear. But there's a lot of funny stories. I know a lot about the class of 99 and 2000. I mean, it's like, you know, and I'm still friends with you guys. That's the thing. I mean, I don't know of a lot of places, you know, that I don't know. It's the connections are important. But again, you talked about all the activities in the concert, and Corey Landstrom is instrumental in some of that and a lot of that for bringing the campus activities board up onto the, you know, into the forefront, and student government, and really giving over, I mean, the governance of the student body to students. Let them run with it, and let you guys make some mistakes now and then, and not go crazy, you know, being punitive, but saying like, okay, that was a mess. Let's not do that again, but learn from it.
Yeah, Matt Glassman was. I had him on a few weeks ago, and he made the point that, you know, one of the things he loved about the school was it was the kind of place that whatever you wanted to do, you could go do. Or David Gaines last week, you want to start a TV show, go start a TV show, and for a school of that size to have the access to the things we had was really incredible.
I think it was about starting it yes rather than no. Let's say, like, come to my office, pitch me an idea. Okay, yes. All right. In order to make this happen, here are 3 things you need to do. Go and do them and come back to me, or whatever. You know, like, that's minimizing it, but it was. And I think that it what it's done is it's created a very vibrant student life at that campus, and there, you know, there are a lot of facilities now to be able to use, and I don't know if North Court is still standing or not. Or the Bundy Fish Room. Oh my God.
The Fish Room.
I mean, now I think
whose
about
idea was that? Come on, let's get into that one.
I have nothing to do with that. I think, you know, part of that was you also, although the men's groups, the fraternities, I mean, they were called private societies too, which is a whole other piece. But the women didn't have any housing at all. I mean, It was, you know, so you have that Title IX, well, it's not really Title IX. It's more of an equity.
Yeah.
But, you know, if you're moving your college forward into the 21st century, you know, and looking ahead, any good administration, board of trustees, planning body is looking at, okay, we definitely have some issues here, and we've got to correct them. What are some things we can do to do that?
Mm-hmm. And it felt a bit trial and error, right? Which I guess is understandable. Of, you know, the Bundy Fish Room. Well, that'll be a social space. No, okay, we need some better social spaces than that one. So we'll try out this one, or, you know.
We launched a lot. I mean, Commons was like when that first year. Yeah, I mean, I was shutting down parties at 3 a.m. in Commons.
Yeah, I remember.
And it wasn't pretty. Let me tell you. But I'd like a retroactive pay raise, Hamilton College.
Clearly some PTSD is getting triggered right now.
More like, oh my God, I saw those anyway, you know, like what?
I marveled that was, I remember that my first year when parties would be in Commons, and how it was ready for breakfast the next morning. I'll never know.
Oh, jeez. I know.
The floor might have still been a little sticky, but, you know.
But honestly,
I would imagine anyone involved in that decision would point back and say it was the right decision. At what point, you were there for a while after, at what point did it feel like, yeah, we did the right thing?
I think when just that students who might have felt marginalized or not affiliated with a fraternity, a sorority, or social organization were, you know, all of a sudden like, oh, I can go to social host training. We can have the juggling club can have an event. Or, I mean, rugby probably loved it more than anyone.
We had a few parties.
Few songs, I know. But like, again, you know, La Vanguardia, you know, different multicultural student organizations could celebrate, you know, their events, and if, you know, there's a lot of different opportunities for use of space, you know, and you know, or, you know, just having room to have an event or have a meeting and have access to that. The other thing was access to kitchens and cooking, and you know, that was one area that, you know, the trustees didn't just wake up one day in '94 and say, oh, we're gonna, you know, disrupt the campus. There had been 3 or 4 years of research, studies, surveys went out to parents, students, alumni, faculty, current students, and a lot of, that was gathered and then drilled down. And I think there were like 10 things that were consistent that students would like to have. And it was access to, kitchen facilities, access to meeting room space, access to social event space. And a lot of those things were what the houses had, but other students didn't have. So I think so when I started to see other groups start to reserve spaces, we'd like to use North Court to do a fundraiser event, not necessarily a party, or we'd like to use, I'm trying to remember all the spaces now. I know there were more than that. Or, Bundy Dining Hall, which was no longer a dining hall after that. And there was a Bundy party. We want to have an event down there. A lot of different groups could do that.
My favorite was I think the hidden gem, not the hidden gem, but the one that rarely got used, but the rugby team would use regularly was the, I forget what the official name was, but it was that wing of Bristol that had the outdoor patio.
Oh yeah. The hub, the Bristol hub.
Yeah, that was the best room to have a party in. And I feel like the rugby team is the only one that ever did.
Yeah, before the little pub, there were before my time, there were pub nights in Bristol. It was kind of like the place that they could do that in. I mean, that was the other thing, Dave. One of the initiatives was, let's have a campus pub. The little pub was born out of that. Class of 96 that lived in the farmhouse took full advantage of that, by the way. They know who they are. Some of them were on the call a few weeks ago. But and again, I mean, here's another thing. You asked me what told me we had done the right thing, is to go in the little pub on a Friday afternoon and see the entire math department with their seniors who are all of age sharing a pitcher of beer. And having fun socially with or without alcohol, and alcohol wasn't the focus of that conversation. I was like, oh, this is pretty good. Yeah.
I vividly remember on a Friday or Saturday night, my senior year, being in the pub, and there would be a cry to say, well, let's go downtown. And a lot of people would say, why? We're good right here. Why would you? And I think
I just want to hang out with Chad Marshall all night and talk, why not?
Right. And I think that, that you point to that and say, okay, even back then, I think it was, well, maybe that all that hubbub for the last 3 years about social spaces and parties, while it seems so important, by the end, the pub's fine. We're good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And treating students like the functioning adults that they are. I mean, I guess from the get-go, one of the things I feel like I didn't always get everything right, but I think one of the things I got right is I never talked down to a student ever. Mm-hmm. And I refused to do that. And maybe there were times I wanted to. I mean, the best conversations are when someone changes your mind and they give you evidence on why, and I always thought that, some of my most significant moments at Hamilton were because we encouraged discourse on campus. We would bring in speakers or we'd give students an opportunity to come in and vent. And then I'd say, all right, well, let's walk back through this together.
You mentioned a big driver of the decision was, in many ways, equality. Mm-hmm. Yet, even with that, and as things evolved over at least the 4 years I was there, diversity on campus was an issue, or in many ways lack thereof. But at least at the time I was there were clashes with the Rainbow Alliance and the GLBTQ community. Mm-hmm. But I'm interested how that's evolved over time at Hamilton, because it was, as I understand it, the campus is far more diverse as it was back in the 90s. And I can't imagine at that time what it must have been like for students of color.
Mm-hmm. And, I think that I had a very close working relationship with, some of the programs and the multicultural office through the admission office. And we would often make sure that most of our student staff in Bristol Campus Center, Beinecke Village, were students that we had different programs. We did, it was less about race, ethnic background, and it might have been about coming from Chicago or Philadelphia or New York City into, oh my gosh, there's no lights at night here. It's a different environment.
Sure.
Socioeconomically perhaps, but just different, and getting to know those students really well. But I think, Dave, like when I knew that we were moving, it was actually I left Hamilton in 2001. Colgate made me an offer I couldn't refuse. Coming back over for something like the chili cook-off in February, and seeing a completely different representation of who was participating and which student groups, and how many new student groups there were, for a variety of differences, and racial and ethnic and religious, it was, backgrounds, and just celebrating themselves, not, just to be able to be on a campus and be yourself was so evident, and be comfortable and feel safe. And it's also, it goes back to just a little bit of educate, like that, I go back to freshman seminars, or, a lot of times people would say, oh, the campus, we need to, we've got a problem with XYZ, and, discrimination would be there, or homophobia would be part of it. Well, we'll teach them at orientation, and it's like, yeah, we can talk about it, but it's students are going to look for an adult figure on campus that they identify with, or that they trust as an adult. And, a lot of times that's a teacher. And we've learned in student, the research shows that a student will persist and do well in college when they feel that there's an adult that cares about them. And oftentimes that influences them. So it's hard to go back and retrain a faculty to confront these issues. And it's even, tougher when you're a majority white school district like the one I work in now, where we've got 468 students, and maybe 12 students of color, Black and brown students, and who, I have to say our students have risen up, and they've been out and they've been marching, and I have high hopes for Generation Z, Dave. I really do. But yeah, I mean, Gloucester, a lot of what, these communities are also, we're in a pandemic. So there, you've got people staying in and trying to be safe and watching the news and wanting to do something, but maybe not choosing to get out there as much as another time.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear you're optimistic about Gen Z. The youth is it's always the young people who change the world, right?
Well, you look at a lot of the marches in the major cities too, and it's been the youth that have organized a lot of that. And it may be because they're proficient with social media applications and getting the word out, as opposed to, anyway. But, I've been very public in, people ask me, wow, you left higher ed to go work at a high school. Like, yeah, it was more a geographic move, but I feel like I'm 6 years in now, and I do, I treat the students with respect and dignity, and we, trying to move them into their post-secondary plans. But if I could work anywhere again, it would be at Hamilton College.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, and it could be like, I don't know if I want to go back to 93, 94, 95.
You don't want people yelling at you, give me my fraternity house back?
But I love the class of 96 tremendously, and 99 is comes in right there with them. So, but
so then let's talk about all the ways in which Hamilton is better than Colgate.
Smaller, more intimate, has a pub that people actually go to.
There you go.
I'm a smaller is better, I guess, kind of thing.
Well, it's
but fun. Also the one thing that still to this day sticks with me about Hamilton is, the student rights and the handbook, and knowing that handbook, and and First Amendment rights. And you may be disgusted with Margaret Thatcher. That's great. Prepare a couple statements and deliver them. don't, but like think about it, think critically. I mean, we had some really controversial speakers come to campus during my time. Phyllis Schlafly, I was on the elevator with her. I was also on the elevator with Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who blessed me on that Bristol elevator. So
you're good. You're good.
Yeah. I got hugged by Jimmy Carter. There's all the things to that, but there's always, the fairness with which students are treated. It was something that will stay with me, but that you had the right to express yourself. And you also had the right to, again, goes back to the organization, is the right to freely associate. So
do you think
speaking well and being able to present your ideas has been a solid brick in Hamilton's foundation.
Back to the Colgate thing. Interesting thing to me is, at least during my time, I can't tell you how many times I felt like there were people who said, I couldn't get into Colgate, so I came here. And I feel like over time that changed.
I feel like it's definitely the other way around. Oh my gosh. I wouldn't have been accepted at either place, but I was fortunate to work there.
It's a miracle I was accepted when I was accepted. Forget about now.
Oh, it's, that's a whole other conversation for another day, is college admission with the varsity blues and testing and the pandemic and all that. But, I think people, if you're going to go visit colleges and you're like, it's spring of my junior year, I'm going to go poke around upstate New York, you're going to probably hit Union, Hamilton, Colgate, maybe go out to Hobart, William Smith, maybe go up north to St. Lawrence, Clarkson, loop around, but they're in such close proximity that, like, why not, Johnny? Let's go look at, let's go down the road and look at Colgate or look at Hamilton. But the funny thing is, Dave, I cannot tell you how many times, usually in the summer, I'd be in my office in Bristol, and Teresa would be in the front office, or we'd had student employees in the summer, and someone would come in and say, "Where's your admission office? We have an interview." And we'd say, and they think because we were Hamilton College, they were looking for Hamilton, New York. So they would be looking for Colgate. And it was
good way to pick students off, right?
Yeah. Like, you don't even bother.
That's right. That's right.
But
so speaking of, that's one thing I did want to ask you is having worked in higher ed, now working in secondary education, can the trend of these insanely expensive colleges and the competitiveness with which is to get into almost any college now, can that continue? Is that sustainable?
No, it's not. What's
going to happen?
I feel like there'll be some mergers. I think there's already some in the works. I have a feeling Gettysburg is merging with some. I mean, like it's serious, Dave. It's astounding to me. Everyone wants to compete for the students. So there was a time when there was a ton of science centers were big. Like, we got a new science center. We're going to, we get this, we're going to build this. We've got this building. And some of those were planned 20 years out in advance, like Hamilton had planned Martin's Way and a lot of those other pieces far in advance. There's long range planning committees, but you got to heat those buildings in the winter. You've got to clean them. There's like the physical plant expenses to run a campus. Mm-hmm. And then if you're looking at a reduction, in summer programs are that's a funding source. If you can't do those things because of economic and/or we're in a pandemic reasons. It's going to be tough for a few years, and I think there'll be some difficult decisions on some campuses. Some campuses are healthier than others. My prediction, I think community colleges are going to do pretty well through this. I think that students
trade schools, yeah.
Yeah, one of my best friends from my undergrad years is the president of Berkshire Community College out in Pittsfield, and I haven't talked with her lately. She's a little busy right now. But I'd be interested to catch up with her and find out, because they have a partnership with Mass College of Liberal Arts. I mean, the state college systems can maybe do some things together. But it's affordable. I mean, dual enrollment for a high school student. So we had a couple students, one in particular, who took advantage of taking a couple courses at Salem State College, University, or North Shore Community College, chipped away. She's starting at UMass with probably 24 credits already on the books for college, and it will save a lot of money. Will finish her 4-year degree early, et cetera, et cetera. So you've got to, I guess, what's the tough part for me is with families that don't want to hear, like, gosh forbid I say community college or state college. To some folks, it's, NESCAC, or, we want to, this bigger, better, faster. And I'm trying to get folks to maybe pump the brakes a little and look at the big picture, that you're going to get an undergraduate degree for sure. You're going to get into college, but think about what you want your life to be like on the other side, in terms of how much debt do you want to carry? It's astounding. $75,000 for 1 year of an undergraduate education.
That's insane.
But yet a college or university can probably divide that up and explain and show you exactly how that money is spent,
It becomes a market, right? As if you're gonna get the top quality students, you have to have the best facilities, and you have to, as you said before. So it becomes an arms race.
And colleges, rely on a certain percentage of families that can pay their full tuition,
right?
In order so that there's spots for other students who, and thing about Hamilton again. I mean, I feel like I'm on a commercial, but they've been need blind for a long time. That means that they look at an applicant without knowing whether or not that person needs a stitch of financial aid. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. And I imagine what helps round out the student body and diversify the student base. And
exactly.
That's
You're
great.
getting people that, a college admission office for the most part wants students who want to be there for 4 years and contribute in constructive and active ways on their campus. So by doing that, you're getting folks that this is a good match for me. I really want to be there. So I'll shout out to one of your Hamilton College class of 2016. Charlotte Freed just graduated. She was Manchester Essex High School, one of my first, groups of students I got to know. So got a few Hamiltonians, and Jack. Yeah. So we got to get a few more up there.
What's your craziest Hamilton story?
Oh my God, Dave. I feel like a lot of them involved being called in the middle of the night for something. So, like, I don't know, call Bev. No, we had certain responsibilities. We would be on call. But there was one, there's so many. Like when we first opened Beinecke Village and the diner opened and they were serving late night food, and you have people going in there, and this one guy, I remember we had building monitors. I said, that's something that we need to have. I'm going to hire students. We have a staff. They have walkie-talkies back then. And, because that's a Beinecke Student Activities Village. There's a lot of floors, layers to that, nooks and crannies. And this guy was stuffing loaves of bread down his pants. And in the diner, and the diner staff is like, what the heck? So Matt, this is terrible, because this is like 1993. It was my first year there. I don't remember Matt's last name, but I remember he relayed the story in the report the next day to me, or Pat Ingalls or somebody said, oh yeah, we confronted someone who was stealing bread from the diner, but it wasn't like a couple slices. It was like a loaf of bread down his pants. So that was pretty amazing. I mean, there was some, oh man, again, getting a call, even, I think I was on call, but President Tobin calling me and asked me to please go up to campus to close down a party at 2:30 in the morning because of, obviously noise complaints. And I go in, and it's the houses were open at the time, so it was at a fraternity house, and I pull in, and my pajamas are probably, like I probably put on sweatpants or something and a jacket. Campus safety's there, but they're kind of there. I'm like, okay, guys, what's happening? Oh, they won't. They refuse to shut it down. I'm like, yeah. So you get me out of bed. I'm 5 feet tall. I'm gonna go into this crowd of people, and so I went in, and I knew some of the key players, and I said, you have 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. I'm starting now. This music goes off in 10 minutes. So I waited. And, like 9 minutes and 30 seconds, I said, that's it, 30 seconds. And then I shut the power off. So, and I got, and someone started to throw a drink at me, and one of the guys stepped in. I was like, look, it's you guys, it's 2:30 in the morning. It's time.
So 93 you started?
Yeah.
So thinking back to walking on that campus in 1993, had you known then what you know now, would you do anything differently? Would you tell yourself something?
I would have slept a little more.
To prepare for the 2:30 a.m. wake-ups?
The other thing is I put in a lot of effort. I had a really good mentor in Jan Coates, and she delegated a lot of responsibility to me, and I took that seriously. And I think that if I wouldn't change how I went about my job, but I would probably hit the pause button a little more. I think I started to burn out a little bit. So there's that, but yeah, I think we did pretty well. I definitely would have slept more. I mean, there was a lot of, like, Tuesdays, the beginning of the week seemed to be tough because we'd have CAC meetings, or I'd have student media board, or there'd be a news, and I always would check in with the newspaper whether I needed to or not. And,
and those were always late nights. Ugh.
Yeah. or I'd get a call at midnight, be like, I don't know if we should run this or not. I'm like, oh God. But the Spectator, again, like HCL, I think student media at Hamilton will always have a special place in my heart. I think that it's just kind of what my wheelhouse is. And, being up in the hockey rink and calling games with you was a lot of fun.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I learned, aside from learning how to write, I learned the first step in management and delegation in my time as a sports editor at the Spectator, because I didn't know the first thing about layout. I didn't want to know anything about, didn't fancy myself a newspaper person. So we found a younger David Zane, who we made a
That's right.
who wanted to throw himself in to do all the layout. And we said, okay, kid, there you go. I'm going back to my room to write my column. I'll see you later.
Oh my gosh. I forgot about him. Yeah. Oh.
Delegation. It works for me.
There's certain things that I miss about Hamilton. And I think it's because it's small enough. I don't know of any student affairs division now that would involve so many people in day-to-day decision making, and I credit Jan with that. And just bringing people around the table who might not always agree, but having reaching a decision after a conversation, and that's something that stays with me. So
well, this show is about the Hamilton experience, and for people of that era, you were a huge part of that experience, certainly a huge part of mine. So for that, I thank you.
Well, I appreciate that, Dave. And I think, there's a great quote from the Talmud, much I have learned from my teachers, but mostly from my students, and I'm paraphrasing. So I gained a lot of insight and, just interacting with you and all of the class of 99 and 2000. And those were the good years, once we got things were clicking along pretty well.
Oh, it's great to catch up with Bev. she's one of a kind. Absolutely one of a kind. Clearly loves helping students. It was clear then, and it's still clear today. And the students up in Manchester, Essex, I hope they know how lucky they are to have her. I'm sure they do. Last week I mentioned some fun we've been having on Twitter with back issues of The Spectator. I discovered something after I recorded my conversation with Bev, so I didn't have a chance to confront her with this live. But I did text it to her and have been giving her a hard time about it, so I think I'm okay to share it here. But Bev mentions a love of student media, and we talk a lot about The Spectator in the conversation you just heard. But one of the things I found was a phenomenal letter. Now, Bev talks about never talking down to students and loving all students, but man, this pushed it to the edge. Boy, this was an angry Bev. But one of the things, even in an angry letter where she takes two writers to task about things they were writing, and by the way, I think she's right in this letter. I won't read you the whole thing, but one of the things I will just say is throughout this letter, she's living all the things she talked about in the conversation. She's inviting the students to come talk to her. Where she's correcting them, she's inviting them to come so she can share facts, and still welcomes, if they disagree with her, to come talk to her. She was always willing to engage with students, and even in an angry, and I mean, when you open up a letter that says, okay, I've had it, I just can't take it anymore, I think you're angry. Bev's a good sport, and I was glad to be able to connect with her. You've been listening to Had I Known on WHCL-FM, at Had I Known Show on Twitter, hadiknown.buzzsprout.com for previous episodes, and later today for this episode. As always, my thanks to Dr. Michael Woods for supplying all the music on the show. And, of course, as always, here's Doc to play us out. Happy Father's Day once again to all the dads out there. We'll talk to you next week.